I came to the show late. I didn't start watching Ted Lasso until the second season. A bunch of friends finally convinced me to watch it. I wrote about the show for my blog, which a couple people at Apple TV found, and they started putting me on their guest
No,
list for all the stuff. Yeah. So I went to the third season premiere 3 years ago, and then I went to this latest premiere 10, 11 days ago. It was really good.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a fun fact. I got to go to the very last recording of Will and Grace.
No, are you serious?
Yeah, because
Oh
my
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 gosh.
good friend knew the people. It was very interesting to watch a live television show.
It's so interesting to me that there are young people who don't understand the importance of Will and Grace in the LGBTQ rights
Yes.
movement. So that's striking to me.
Okay, so
It was revolutionary for its time.
where are you right now? Are you in DC?
No, I'm in Philly just for the
You're
night.
in Philly,
Just to visit a friend, and then I'm gonna head to DC tomorrow. So
and you live in DC.
yeah, I live in DC. Yeah, lived here for gosh, a very long time, much longer than my spirit can bear at this point.
I really can't imagine. I mean, people laugh that I live in Florida, but I think I'd rather live in Florida than DC.
It's its own vibe, and there's so much about DC that I love. And let me be clear, like the Marble core of DC, the capital area, is just stressful, and it's got bad vibes over the past couple
Yeah.
years.
It really
I
depends
used
on,
to,
like, who's in charge. Like, it's probably a blast if it's Obama or even Biden or, whoever. But when it's a Republican administration, it's a whole different vibe.
yeah, the atmosphere changes, and this is probably I would say the worst it's been in my very long time here. So, it's been quite a week in politics.
You think?
A little bit, a little bit. Last night we had our primaries in a number
Yep.
of states, including Michigan, and the
What time
Victorian
did you go to
politics.
bed?
I went to bed at 3 a.m.
Me too. I was like 2. I'm so exhausted, I feel insane.
Yeah, it's been a lot, and we have more of these nights coming. So
Oh, good.
it's midterms. I swear, when I was a kid, I loved elections because I thought they were really exciting and interesting, and they hit that nerdy part of me. But I gotta tell you, every subsequent election cycle in my adult lifetime has been more and more stressful.
Yes. And I wonder, like,
So,
there seemed to be a point at which everything seemed existential. Like, it really seems existential now, but people were saying it was even when it was Romney versus Obama.
yeah, and it
And
felt
I
that
can't
way.
it did, but was like it just I don't know when it started, but at some point every election cycle became existential, and it's so exhausting because you start to think the outcome of this election could be the end of democracy or the end of life as we know it or our children's futures on the it's just it becomes overwhelming.
It does, and I tell folks, like, think about how you felt in 2012, when it looked for a little bit like Mitt Romney might win, and now Mitt Romney would be a gift.
Yes,
Uh,
are you kidding me? If Mitt Romney was an sorry, my husband is texting me. If
That's
Mitt
all good.
Romney was a candidate, I mean, I guess I would be considered a Republican at some point because he just seems like such a normal human.
He seems like a normal human. He engages in good faith. Well, most of the time, he's
Most of the time.
certainly more honorable and about 100 times less sociopathic than any given Republican in the Senate or in the White House, for that
Yes.
matter. So
Yes.
back then we had very good reason to worry about him becoming president. And so I tell people who are thinking about, for whatever reason, sitting out any of these elections, for whatever reason, don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't
I
don't
don't care how
don't
much.
don't sit it out.
No, for any reason. We need
Yep.
Democrats to take back the House, the Senate, and then eventually the White House. And if you sit out a Senate election right now, what you're doing is allowing the possibility that a Republican could take this seat could hold it for the foreseeable future, especially in a swing state like Michigan. And that could affect SCOTUS nominations. It could affect the power of the Senate to prevent any number of ridiculous actions that the executive can take. And we've certainly seen that case study over the past 10 years in a very visceral way. I just think people need to take a breath, sit back for a second, and understand that there are consequences far greater than whether or not we like, this candidate or that candidate. I'm tired of the infighting. I think it's
Yeah,
ridiculous. And yeah,
the
sorry.
factional politics, I think, are so like, let's take a step back and give context for this. This is, I mean, I'm older than you. I don't
Not by much.
remember. Yeah, I am. I could have been your babysitter, but I do think factional politics is something that has gotten worse.
Mhm.
It used to be very much Democrats versus Republicans, and now I think I would love your thoughts. We've lived through the Tea Party. In the Republican Party, we saw the vacuum of leadership lead to the rise of Donald Trump, lead to the rise of MAGA, and just create a party that is sort of shameless and fearless, right, of any kind of consequences. And so here we are on our side, and I think we've learned some wrong lessons from what happened with the Republican Party. I think what is happening is sort of normal and to be expected, given that Donald Trump is president again, and we're like looking at. It. I have this. This is my theory, and I'm interested in what you think. Silent generation. Most of them died in their 60s because of lack of medical advances, because of smoking. And there really was no example set for baby boomers and Gen Xers of how to transition power.
Mhm.
There was never the idea that you would live to be 80, 90, 100 and still feel pretty good. And when something becomes your entire identity, when something makes you feel alive, you don't want to step away from it. And they don't have an example of how to do that. And so I think this is probably the first generation where they live an incredibly long time and will look back, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to be honest, and say,
Mhm.
you know what? You overstayed your welcome and you did a real disservice to the country by not hi- preparing a bench and then when the time was right, handing the power over. And I wrote about this after Donald Trump was elected for the second time, which was there is a vacuum of leadership. No one was angry. Everyone was like, let's do rope a dope. James Carville was like, people will see what Trump is doing and revolt. And there was like, no one was getting caught trying.
Mhm.
And I think that so angered particularly young people that the party fractured. And that's where we exist today. And there still is no leadership in my mind. Like I
Mhm.
can't point to who is Democratic leader.
No.
Uh, what do you, I mean? Do you agree with that
I
hypothesis?
could not agree more. I could not agree more. I mean, my first sign of trouble, and we talked about this previously, I think last time we talked actually, but my first sign of trouble was the period between election day in 2024 and congressional swearing-in day. Because I wasn't hearing anything. I wasn't hearing from folks like, "Here's a strategy. Here's what's gonna be, the long-term vision moving forward." It just felt like no one was stepping up. I was talking to a member of Congress. In fact, I talked to 2 separate members of Congress on the phone in late December, early January. Oh,
Why
so
did you how did you send all those balloons into the air?
I have no idea. That's
That
so
was
interesting.
really very cool.
Um, what can I say? Trans excellence, what can I say? It's incredible. Uh, but it was interesting though, because I talked to 2 separate members of Congress on the phone, and I asked them both, like, "Hey, was there any effort in that 6 weeks or that 10 or whatever it was between election day and the start of the new Congress for Democratic folks, lawmakers to get together and come up with a plan of, doing responsible obstruction of Trump's policies,
Right.
having an electoral, strategy, national messaging, something." Both of them confirmed that if there was anything like that, they hadn't heard of it. Think about that for a second. When President Obama was elected in 2008, we not only elected President Obama by a large margin, but we had a huge congressional majority going into that. Republicans could have said, well, hey, here's this highly popular historic figure who's just become president. And Democrats have this enormous congressional majority. Maybe we should just work with them and see what we can find. Areas of common ground. They didn't do that. They gathered in locations in DC late November or early December, and they came up with a literal plan for obstructing President Obama at every turn.
Yep,
We didn't do that.
exactly.
And we don't have a leader. You're right. I cannot point to a single person and say that's the leader of the party because during Trump's first term, it was Nancy Pelosi, hands down.
Yes, and look, Nancy Pelosi, I think even Chuck Schumer 15, 20 years ago would never allow what is happening in the party to happen now. They just don't have the juice, and that is not to be, critical because they've been amazing lawmakers, but they're way past the time when they should have handed over power to other people in the party or stepped aside altogether. But I also think it's interesting that no one has sort of stepped into the breach. I thought AOC might do that. I thought, I think Jake Auchincloss has sort of made a little bit of an effort to do that. Um, I guess, it's hilarious in a way because he's 84 years old, but Bernie Sanders, at least from the left, is definitely doing that.
Yep.
But nobody really that is maybe also, I bristle at being called a centrist or a moderate. I was to the left of Kamala Harris,
Yep.
and now I'm like the leftists are calling me Republican light. So it's a whole new day.
You and I are in this weird band on the political spectrum where we're not exactly center left, but we're not far left either. We're in
Right.
like this progressives with a pragmatic outlook on elections and messaging. That's where we are. And there's a lot of us there. And we feel like the moderates aren't representing us. And we feel like the far left isn't representing us. And so
Yep.
we're stuck during this, how should I call it? Uh, Schism like moment for the history of the
Yes.
party. And it's hard to know where we fit.
I had a conversation with Congressman Auchincloss not that long ago. I reached out to him to say I was really proud of him for standing up against Graham Plattner. This was before the assault accusations about Plattner were made. It was sort of like in that in-between period when it was clear that he had no character, but we weren't quite sure how to move forward with him as a candidate. And so I just DM'd him and I was like, "I'm really proud of you, thank you." And so we had a call, and he said something interesting to me, which is there is a third lane, or there needs to be a third lane. Let's call it the establishment, right? It's like people who we've been talking about have been around forever, who think that like we're just going to do things the way we've always done them and somehow it'll work out fine. And then there's the other end, which are leftists. And, you know, I'm not sure who represents them, but in my mind, it's like people like Hassan Piker, who I have a very public ongoing feud with. And so like, is there a middle lane there of someone who can knit the party together and be that voice that maybe brings in some of each side? People that come to mind to me are Pete Buttigieg, Jake Auchincloss, maybe a mature AOC. Um, do you have other thoughts on who that would be?
I really like Peggy Flanagan.
Amazing.
Obviously not for 2028, but she has done a great job as lieutenant governor, and I feel like she's running for the Senate right now against Congresswoman Angie Craig, and I like Congresswoman Craig. I do. I just feel like Peggy Flanagan has a better pulse
Yeah.
on the electorate and knows what she's doing with messaging. She's a progressive who I feel like understands pragmatic strategy and how to bring people into the fold and expand the tent. She's really good at that. I think for 2028, and my maxim for the last 18 months has been let's get to 2026 first and then worry about 2028. But it feels like the last 2 months are really forcing our hands on this discussion now, because what happens the next 3 months is going to very significantly shape the 2028 conversation, far more than I think we would have expected it would.
Mhm.
So, I think for 2028, I'm not sure that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez should run for the presidency. I'm not quite seeing it yet. I think that she definitely should run against Chuck Schumer for Senate. I am fully behind her for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people and maybe the silver lining is we don't even know who the people will be yet that pop up and who, I mean, no one had really heard of Barack Obama. It
Mhm.
seems to me what the party is struggling with, and someone just mentioned this, like, how do you call yourself liberal and you have supported people who take APAC? I mean, people have taken APAC for a long time. I don't support APAC. I don't support corporate money generally. I
Yeah.
wish that the Supreme Court had not allowed that. And I would, if I ran for office, I would not take APAC dollars.
Yeah.
Um, I think the Michigan Senate race is interesting because, as you said, it truly does feel like an existential threat. But we have to decide who could win statewide.
Mhm.
I supported Mallory McMorrow, and then when she stepped out, I thought Haley Stevens was the person who could win statewide, and it was very close last night. Like we got down to a point, but and now we all have to coalesce around
That's right.
El Sayed.
Dr. El. Yeah, yeah.
I think some of the issues, that I guess one, coming back to Hassan Piker, like who are we as a party? And I will just say my experience having started Moms Demand Action the day after the Sandy Hook school shooting, Alex Jones was a kind of a nobody. He was, in circles and he was kind of coming into his own, but it was really Sandy Hook that helped propel him into fame and fortune. And it was all based on conspiracy theories and lies and just like trolling and going after people. And I don't think that's who we should be,
Mhm.
as a party. I do not believe that we should be mimicking the very worst of what we're seeing in the Republican Party. There are between 300 and 400 million people in this country. Surely we can find 535 people who have good standing, good character, who are kind, ideally working class. Like when I think of really hardworking people, Lauren Underwood, Joe Neguse, Jason Crow, Juliana
Mhm.
Stratton is going to be an amazing senator. Talk about working
Yes.
class. She came from the South Side, a New Union family with a teacher mom, I think, and a union dad. And like these are some of the people that make me really excited
Me too.
about being a Democrat. And so it'll be really interesting to see how the factions fight this out.
Yeah, I think you nailed it perfectly. And, when I've had a lot of conversations with folks in the establishment Democratic world, certainly folks who are legitimate centrists and identify as centrists, and they'll be like, "Well, what is going on with the far left, and how are they winning some of these elections?" And what I tell them is, "Look, you can look at these candidates and question why voters would support them, but they are filling a vacuum that
Yes.
should never have been created in the first place."
Yes.
You know, Mayor Mamdani, who I think is been a very capable
Agree.
of New York City this year. He's done a great job with it. Um, I don't think he's elected if the Democratic establishment coalesces around Andrew Cuomo. I don't think that
Right.
happens. But he was a
Which was
response.
actually a good, it was like that when you talk about like playing this out in real life,
Yeah.
that was right. We shouldn't have reelected Cuomo. He never should have
No,
been the candidate.
absolutely not. Yeah, not I mean, it was so obvious to all of us. I felt like outside of some establishment circles that you try to push forward this guy, it's going to backfire, and it did. It backfired in a major way.
Even like Schumer picking Janet Mills.
Oh god, and pushing other folks out, pushing the other
Yes,
folks out.
what in the hell? I would love to see them sort of stay out of these because maybe Troy would have been the nominee to begin with.
Yeah, maybe he would have been the organic nominee and had a bunch of way more moments in than he currently has going into the
Yes.
uh, but I think Senator Schumer is desperate to hold on to power, and it really is
Uh,
time for him to pass the torch. It's been long
Please,
past time for
sir,
him to pass the
go.
torch.
The irony of him going over to Joe Biden's house and asking him to leave the
Ugh.
race when he won't do it himself. I mean, who needs to go to Chuck Schumer's house?
Yeah.
AOC?
I and it's sad to me because Senator Schumer has done some extraordinary things in his career, he really has, but he has made so many unforced errors in the past 18 months that I see things that he does, and I think to myself, "Who's advising him?" I wonder who he sits down with how do they sketch out what they're seeing? How do they talk about messaging? All these sorts of things, I feel like it's just things just slip through the cracks, or he doesn't have the guts to believe the American people are gonna rally behind him if he's far more bold. I think leader Hakeem Jeffries has gotten a lot better over the past 18 months. I was not necessarily quite there early in the Congress, but he's done a pretty good job with messaging recently, and I think he and his team have shown some dramatic improvement. Leader Schumer, though, I can think of maybe 2 times in the past 18 months in this saturated media environment where there are 2 or 3 news cycles a day. I can think of maybe twice that I thought, "Oh, good job." That was a really big win. The rest of the time, it's just like, "What are you doing?" You know, "What are you doing?" Yeah, I think that as a party, we need to get together and understand that the far left is filling a vacuum at an alarming rate, with some ridiculous messaging that's not gonna win over
I mean, I'm
a
sorry,
lot.
but the Francesca Hong,
Oh, God.
even Bernie Sanders came out today and said he can't endorse her.
That was the
How is she going to be the gubernatorial candidate I lived in Wisconsin. She doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of
no,
becoming
no,
the
that's for
Wisconsin
sure.
governor, and we were 2 seats away from holding the House, we were 5 seats away from holding the Senate, and this is an important governor in terms of validating and verifying who the president is. So,
That's right.
I mean, it's just like, how many lessons do we need to learn?
It's ridiculous, and, I really like Francesca Hong. I think that her heart is very much in the right
Yes, she
place.
seems lovely.
I would want her as a next door neighbor, I would.
Yep,
The thing is, though, your messaging has gotta be on point. What the messaging that would work in a far more blue state or a far more blue congressional district is not necessarily the messaging that would work in a perennial swing state. It doesn't work that way. You can't say things like, I'm not too hot on Thanksgiving and, maybe it should be canceled and here are the
and
reasons
to be
why.
honest,
And
I agree. I'm not a
yeah,
I hate that whole holiday, but, it is so strange to me that she doesn't seem to have a media trainer.
no, no. And I think it comes from a very good place of wanting to be honest with people,
Yeah,
wanting to lay your cards on the table, have honest conversations. There are some battles you can't fight in public during a really tight election. And this is going to be a tight election for Democrats. It really is. I when I saw the
you mean
video,
like the House and Senate?
yeah, well, the House, the Senate, the gubernatorial
Yeah,
election. I mean, they're all going to be tough fights, all of them. And
yeah,
we got to get back to look. If your thing is let's reform the economy, and, let's have some really radical proposals like Medicare for all, having a high national minimum federal wage. These are tax the hell out of corrupt billionaires. I'm all for it. Let's do it.
yes.
Stick to that. Stick to those things. Don't don't go on camera with a reporter and say, yeah, Thanksgiving not so hot about it. I don't know. It's
The
it's
weirder thing was like, what was it she wanted to do? Um, there was another thing that was so hilarious. I can't remember, but
Well,
she definitely has a thing
defund the
about
police.
holidays. Yeah, but she went back on that. I mean, that's part of the problem too. It's like she made all these had all these positions as a member of the DSA, and now that's not gonna fly as the government. So it's like, you gotta walk all that back, and there's, like, a certain way to do that. Anyway, oh, someone said daylight savings, maybe that was it. It it shouldn't be this close going in this cycle.
No, no, that's the thing. I mean, you and I have been through some of the Democratic comeback cycles. 2006 is the big one in our
Yep,
lifetime. That's when, the war in Iraq was just failing miserably, and there was the Walter Reed scandal, and all these other things. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer came in, and it was an incredible cycle. But President Bush's approval ratings were dropping.
Mhm.
Republicans were not popular. I want to say it was like D+8, D+10 for the national average that cycle. So we had an enormously successful midterm year for Democrats in 2006. It should be even bigger right now. I remember in early 2006 that it was almost just accepted wisdom the Democrats were going to take back Congress in a walk. I don't really necessarily feel that right now. I think the House is more or less a lock, whether that's by 1 or 2 seats or by 5 or 10 seats. Who knows? Maybe it'll be 20 seats. I would love that. But the Senate, definitely not certain at all. And it should be certain. It should be certain right now that Democrats are going to take back the Senate, but it's not certain. It's not. And I got to say, I really like Dr. El Sayed. I think he's had an incredible career. I believe he's a good person. I do think he's made a lot of unforced errors with messaging. I feel like his campaign has not tried to pivot early enough to a general election campaign in a perennial swing state. And part of that for me, too, is the relationship with Hassan Piker. And, I think folks on the far left, they can say, well, that's unfair. There's a lot of misinformation. You can say whatever you want, but all Republicans have to do is cut ads praising Mao, saying that America is to blame for 9/11, which is Tom Piker said back in 2017, and he did apologize for it, take it back. Fine, they're still going to take those clips and run them.
Yeah.
Like it
I
doesn't
think
matter if it's fair.
No, I think Dr. El-Sayed has to come out, and I would be shocked if he doesn't in the next 2 weeks. If he doesn't come out in the next 2 weeks and sort of disavow Hassan Piker, I think he's in trouble. Um, Adam Jenelson wrote about this tonight on Twitter, just how, like, it's just the way you gotta do it, whether you're friends with someone or not. Like, if you wanna win a statewide election, you're gonna have to go court the people that Stevens won. Black voters, rural voters, working class voters. You don't win Michigan statewide without those people. And we all, it is time to coalesce around this candidate. This is our candidate, and we all have to get him over the finish line. I wonder what solves the factional problem. Like, how do we figure out, is it Netanyahu loses? We decide as a party to defund Israel, and then that part of the agenda has been accomplished and we can
Mhm.
coalesce? Or is this just something that plays out depending on, like leftists have to lose in swing or red states, or leftists actually win in those places and so then they become dominant? I don't know.
I think for our part, those of us who are not part of the far left, we need to demonstrate good faith in supporting Dr. El Sayed and saying, look, the Senate is the most important thing. Democrats need to take back the Senate. And beyond that, it would be so long term, just disastrous long term for us to lose this seat, to lose this
Yes.
Democratic seat in Michigan. We need to focus on, really throwing our weight behind Dr. El Sayed and making sure that he has the best chance possible to defeat Mike Rogers, who would be 1,000 times worse than any Democrat could be. The other thing, too, I think that we do need to be putting pressure on our government to no longer be involved in any
Yep.
aspect of the process for arming Israel at all,
Agree.
period. We can have perhaps certain earmarked funds for organizations that everyone understands is doing human rights work, that is trying to build toward collective safety in the Middle East. Maybe there are really nuanced conversations to be had there, but arming Israel has been a disaster, an
Yes.
unmitigated disaster. Netanyahu has taken advantage for a long time now of the good faith of American citizens in wanting to protect innocent folks in the Middle East and in Israel specifically. But you know, this carnage against innocent Palestinian civilians, the role of Israel in this disastrous war in Iran. Netanyahu is one of the most evil
Yes.
political figures of the 21st century, hands down. We should not be we should try to be put pressure on the Israeli government to force him out. That's what we should be
Yeah.
doing right now.
And there's this whole conversation that's playing out in the party too, which is interesting around AIPAC, where some people who are more moderate centrists are saying, "Oh, AIPAC represents Jewish Americans," and then there are people who are saying, AIPAC is, and this is where I stand. I believe AIPAC is causing chaos, and I think a good example of it is Michigan, where they just put $62 million into Stevens' campaign, and they announced today they're going to go right in and support Rogers.
Mhm.
And so, their interests do not support the Democratic Party. Their interests support their interests. And I think we're going to get to a point where a lot of candidates just aren't going to take their money, is my guess. They're going to become a
No,
fully right wing, and they've done themselves a disservice. They've done Israel a disservice. They've done Jewish Americans a disservice. Like it's just Apex a disaster.
like I know, neither of us are Jewish, and I know that we've talked a lot about anti-Semitism being an enormous problem in the U.S. in the past several years, especially the violence that Jewish Americans have faced in this country. The shooting at the Jewish History Museum here in D.C. that killed two young Jewish employees at the Israeli embassy. The uh, the basically the terrorist attack with that Molotov cocktail
And
that killed
Boulder.
someone. Yeah, Boulder, and of course, the attack on the synagogue in Michigan. That attempted uh, the attack with a car, in which it was incredibly violent, and the response to that was again muted. And the response to all of these tends to be a little more muted than it should be.
Yes.
And that is terrifying. And I know that we have a lot of Jewish American friends who are very terrified right now and
There
do fear
I
for their safety.
absolutely.
But I don't think APAC is improving the situation at all. I don't. I
No.
think that they are injecting the overall conversation with a ton of bad faith where, it feels like, and this does not, to be clear, this does not represent, mm, you know, Jewish Americans generally, even most Jewish Americans, I would say, if I can be so bold as someone who's not Jewish to point that out, but the folks who are, I would say, Jewish and non-Jewish who support AIPAC, I don't think they realize how much damage this is doing to our body politic, to the collective safety of all of us, and specifically to the collective safety of Jewish Americans. There needs to be a really hard conversation for folks who actually care about anti-Semitism in this country. And I would like AIPAC to really examine how much they've been part of the problem over
Yep.
the past few years.
Yep. And conversely, I think we have an issue with anti-Zionism becoming anti-Semitism. And this idea that we're going to just say, "Oh, it's not. It's just we're just against Netanyahu. We're just against, Israel, certain people, certain groups." I'm too often anti-Zionism is turning into anti-Semitism. It's
Yes,
just a code word.
it feels like it. And here's what I have conversations with folks who are strongly anti-Zionist, and I'll tell them, look, we can talk about that term all day and the hundred different definitions for it, depending on whom we're talking to in any one point. There are folks on the far left who are Zionists. There are centrists who are anti-Zionists. It's complicated. It's very, very complicated. But here's one thing that's not complicated for me: the fact that the vast majority of Zionists in this country, the vast majority of Zionist politicians, public figures, places of worship, are not Jewish. The vast majority of them are not Jewish. And yet, when we hear about criticism of uh, uh, Zionist forces in this country, the way it's framed by folks who are very anti-Zionist, it's never about evangelical churches who fetishize Israel. It's never about evangelical politicians who fetishize Israel. It's never about organizations that are very Zionist in nature, and they're really just Christian nationalist fronts. We never hear about that. We never hear about attacks on churches out of a sense of anti-Zionism, or gatherings of Christians, evangelical Christians who are very pro-Zionist. We don't hear about that.
Yep.
So, it's hard for me to accept that everyone who is anti-Zionist is acting in good faith. It does feel like anti-Semitism because
Yep.
only Jewish people are being targeted. I would say being at the center of these anti-Zionist national conversations. I don't think it's honest. I don't.
I don't either, and, you bring up another point for me, which is, there's all this discussion about the manosphere and the right-wing media sphere and how we needed our own. And what we've built, in my mind, is sort of a replica of theirs. It
Mm,
it is by and large run by men for men. It is extremely left wing. I mean, I think a good example of something that happened in bad faith in the last couple of days, all of these left wing media outlets saying that Stevens Polster, that they all had it on good authority, that Stevens Polster had told her that she was losing by 14 points. And it was a lie. It was a total lie. And it went through the entire echo chamber of left wing media. And that concerns me too. And even like Pod Save America, in my mind, used to be a really good actor that was very independent and very thoughtful and about inculcating the values of President Obama into the conversation around democracy.
mm,
And that all shifted in my mind in the last couple of years. I don't know why. I had a long conversation today with a thought leader about it. Like, what are we seeing and why? But the only media outlet that I can think of that is sort of neutral is the Bulwark.
mm,
And most of them, and let's be clear, it's much easier to make millions of dollars if you are incendiary, if you are putting rage bait out into the world, if you are inciting people to be outraged, and that's, I mean, I'm interested in your opinion, but that's what I'm seeing, and it concerns me because
mm.
it's not valuable to have these echo chambers on either side that are both dishonest.
No, I don't think we're getting good very modeling right now for the electorate on how to engage with the Trump era and people who disagree with us. People who don't see the same things that we do. And that is going to be a big problem, continue to be a big problem moving forward. I can understand it because I realize that all of us on this side of the political spectrum can see the problems, the obvious ones, the lack of democratic leadership, the lack of vision, the fact that there is clearly a vacuum, and folks are upset and they're angry and they don't see their their feelings right now and their mood reflected by
Yes.
the overall democratic leadership apparatus. And so they're going to turn to folks in public who are at least reflecting what they're feeling, that they don't
Yep.
feel crazy, that they don't feel insane because the White House Correspondents Association decided to go forward with the dinner. Um, and Democrats, some Democrats were, Democrats weren't speaking out against that. I mean, we're not seeing our anger reflected. The fact that there are U.S. service members being left off of the list of fatalities in the war in Iran. I don't see any anger from Democratic leadership about that. An issue that would have ended an American presidency 10 years ago.
Mm.
It's like, yes, we have such a frustrating media environment right now, and there are these factions and sub factions. I would say that we're not seeing things the same way in terms of vision, but that's because of a lack of leadership in our party.
Yes. And I just don't know how that gets solved unless someone steps up and says, "I am gonna be the leader who." I mean, I can't, the thought of running for office, I can't imagine anything worse. I was, when I moved to Florida, I had a conversation with someone who said, "We'd really love for you to run against Anna Paulina Luna." That's my congresswoman.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I just thought, do I want people outside my home? Do I want to have these ads, that are just complete and total smears and lies about me and my family? Do I want to hire security for me, for my 5 kids? Um, I really admire the hell out of people who in this moment are willing to sort of I mean, look what happened to Pete Buttigieg, where his family was swatted and his children were taken away from him overnight from just a call from someone who's had like a history of mental illness and had no evidence whatsoever, and which just was so harmful. And I that worries me too that we're really encouraging like reality stars and the most incendiary and the least qualified to run.
I agree with you completely. I also have to admit that part of me, I come from this perspective where, you know, the military background of 18, 19, 20-year-olds signing up to serve, knowing that they may have to sacrifice their life one day for the country and swearing, taking an oath to do that if it becomes necessary. And then many of them did. Many of them did die in service to our country. I have to admit, like, part of me does feel certainly sympathy for folks who are public figures in the party, elected officials, organizational leaders, what have you. I get it. It's scary. The death threats are scary. The harassment online is scary. But where we all throughout our history have asked young people to take on a sacrifice just for serving without any power, without any influence. And then we're seeing folks in political media and in politics, Democrats and Republicans, other public figures who are not willing to pay even a fraction of that degree of sacrifice, not even to speak up because not necessarily because of death threats, but because they're afraid their brand is going to be hurt. I don't know. I get that there are challenges, and I think everyone has to make that decision for themselves and for their families, for that matter.
Yeah,
But the people who are in office right now and who are choosing to stay in office, they need to just meet the moment. I'm sorry, but they
yeah.
do. They have got to meet the moment.
All right. Well, we've been up since 3 a.m., so I'm going to
Yes.
go to bed. But it is so
Yes,
lovely to
ma'am.
see you. As always, I love having conversations with you. And honestly, it makes me feel sane after spending my day on Twitter.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. I adore you as always. And folks, just, you know, try not to let this all get to your head.
Yeah,
November is not November. If we do what we need to do, November is going to be a huge success. But we gotta get together, unify, and beat the hell out of these Republicans in November. So,
yeah. We got to win. That's it. We got to win every
yes, ma'am.
seat. All right,
Amen. Keep up
Charlotte.
the
Thank
fire.
you.
Wow.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.